the larger point I think I'm trying to make today is it's very important that people learn about cybersecurity, not just people who work in the industry, but also end users, because it's the only way that we're going to solve this problem. It's why we're having this conversation. It's why we've partnered with Terra Nova. And specifically focus on awareness training in this business, because it's, I think, one of the easiest ways to get into a company unauthorized. John Chambers, who was the CEO of Cisco for 20 years, famously said there are two types of companies: those that have been hacked and those that don't yet know that they've been hacked. I like putting this slide in here at the start, because I think when you look at it initially, a lot of us will think this is a little bit extremist of a view. It's really not that bad in the real world. Uh, the thing is, once we've gone through this talk, hopefully you'll have a better understanding of just how easy it is for me to do what I do, how easy it is to manipulate those users, and you'll get a better appreciation for why this guy is one of the thought leaders in our field. So we are a little bit pressed for time. You'll have to excuse me if I skip over a bunch of slides. Again, a lot of this stuff has changed over time, and a lot of people know today what the terminology means. The short version, for maybe those that don't know, is a white hat hacker is a good guy. He only ever tries to break in with permission, and the goal is to help businesses identify their vulnerabilities. I like using the analogy of asking a ex-professional burglar who's reformed what is the best way to break into my house, and he'll walk around your house and tell you where you need to make improvements. A penetration test is really the same thing for a corporate network. Black hat hacker is the exact opposite. He's malicious. He's trying to get money out of you. He's trying to blackmail you. He's trying to steal from you. He does not have permission, and the work he does is illegal. A grey hat is somewhere in between. It's not necessarily malicious in nature. He's not trying to steal from you, but he will break in without permission. A good example of this is there was a documented case of a group of individuals breaking into a bunch of people's home routers and then just updating the firmware to remove the vulnerability that they used to break it in the first place. So they were kind of doing it for a good cause, but they were definitely doing it without permission. It was still illegal. That would be considered grey hat hacking. So as I said, we're going to mostly be focusing on social engineering today. Uh, Again, I think most of you know what that is at this point, but just as a summary, when we start driving, we don't just get in a car and start driving. You have to go through a whole process that was laid out for you. You have to write your learner's permit and prove that you know the rules of the road. Then you have to drive with somebody for a while, and eventually you have to take a test to prove to someone that you can drive. So we get taught how to drive a car. And hopefully, similarly, it's true for your first ATM card. You don't just get given one and sent on your way. People teach you how to use it safely. You don't share your PIN with other people. You don't let somebody help you at the ATM. We get taught all of these things from a young age. But then it comes to the internet, which is arguably the most powerful tool you're ever going to use in your life. And nobody teaches you how to use it safely. And that's really why bad things happen. And it's why we're seeing cybercrime expand. The problem is, at least in our lifetime, this is not a problem that's going to go away. More and more of our lives are moving online, and along with that come the fraudsters and the people who are trying to take advantage of us. So spending some time in skilling up, understanding what these attacks look like and protecting yourself is something we're all going to teach our kids as we grow older and as we mature in this space. But it's not something that a lot of us were taught growing up, and that's why attackers are having so much success at the moment. The first and most common attack, and I'll give you a couple of examples, is phishing and spoofing. We talked about that. It's my fallback. When I get stuck, it's what I do, and we're generally very effective in at least getting some people. It's a rigged game, right? Because you have a couple of hundred people maybe working in your organization. I just need to find one who's not paying attention. And it's not necessarily people who are stupid or dumb or evil or malicious or incompetent. We all have bad days. We all have had that day where maybe your kid was up all night crying or sick, and you didn't get enough sleep, or you had a fight with your spouse, or your car wouldn't start this morning. You're just under pressure. You feel like the world is piling on. You're not really paying attention. You have to get 100 emails out before your meeting in 15 minutes, and you expecting an invoice. You click on something. And suddenly your whole computer gets ransomed. It's not that you're incompetent or dumb. It's just that sometimes it's easy. It is fairly easy to make a mistake, and that's what the attackers are looking for. And they just have to get lucky once, where you have to be vigilant every single time. So it's a rigged game. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of attacks that I've done, and I'll also share with you a little bit of how successful we were. One of the most common attacks we do is we sent a Dropbox email saying somebody said please urgently review and provide the requested. Sent this one to 20 people, and 2 of them clicked on the link. And when they click on the link, we just sent them an email that said, listen, this was a social engineering test. You failed and you should feel bad. What we love to do is pretend to be the IT manager. We'll send an email to the whole business saying, please urgently take note of the new password policy effective immediately. And we'll send it as the IT manager, because it is often easy for us to impersonate the IT manager in your business, and also to go find that person's information on LinkedIn or social media. So not that hard to do an attack. I blocked out the actual domain because this was a real client who agreed to let us share their results, but not their name. So you can see I sent it to 50 people, 25, exactly half of them clicked on the link in this case, making it a very successful attack for us. Unfortunately, you can see there are no signatures. It's not a very good attempt. It wasn't very difficult. We were trying to gauge what the sophistication level of the organization was, and this is fairly common. I don't think this is an unusual result. So just be careful. It's very easy for us to also very slightly alter the name. So as an example here, instead of saying hollard.co.za, we'll say one is an L and one is an I, where the 2 L's are next to each other. And it's very difficult when you're reading an email to pick up on that one little anomaly. So we'll buy a domain that's very similar to the real thing, and makes it very easy for us to pretend to be someone we're not, and get people to do things that they're not supposed to. Lastly, here, very common attack for us, either from Google or in today's environment, more Office 365. We send a lot of emails saying someone has tried to log into your account, your mailbox is full, your password needs to be reset, whatever the case is, please log into your mailbox to action this, or you will lose access to your mailbox. People will click on the link, they'll go to my fake login page, and they'll type in their username and password. You'll see that address at the top has absolutely nothing to do with Google. Once they type that in, we capture that username and password, and we're able to log into that account however we want. What we're doing quite a bit today in the work from home environment is, once we get access to that mailbox, we'll go search through the history of emails for the VPN details, and we'll just set up a VPN connection into the office and effectively be that user on the network. And from there, it's usually pretty easy to gain access to all the other documentation that we're not supposed to have. So what happens when you click on these links? There's a lot of different things, but one of the more common ones is what we call a man-in-the-middle attack. Let's pretend for a second, and I'm oversimplifying here, and we'll get into why a little bit later, but let's pretend for a second you are trying to make a connection to your bank to do some banking. When you click on my link, instead of going to the bank directly, you go to me, and I've set up a fake version of the bank's website. When you type in your username and your password, and after that you get asked for your one-time PIN, or you have to press a button on your phone to do the multi-factor authentication, I just take that information you provide to me and I pass it on to the real bank. So I, as the middleman, is making a legitimate connection to the bank using the information you provide. So the username is correct, the password is correct, the one-time PIN is correct, all of the multi-factor authentication requirements are being done correctly and normally, because I'm sitting in the middle capturing all of that data and just forwarding similar data onto the bank. This is a very easy way to manipulate this. Once you've done all your banking, everything looks correct to you, right? Your balances are there, your beneficiaries are there, everything looks correct. But once you click log off, I just don't forward that instruction, and I still have a persistent connection with your bank. Again, I'm oversimplifying a little bit. It doesn't work like that much anymore, but it's very much a cat and mouse game, where the bank or financial institution or whoever is trying to protect you against these attackers come up with new technologies to protect you. Your phone being one of them, and then the attackers come up with new ways to beat that protection. And today we see lots of different attacks that harvest or capture or bypass the multi-factor component of login. So it will never end. It will always be a game of one-upmanship between the guys protecting you and the attackers trying to beat you. I'm going to give you a minute just to read this little SMS. This is between a colleague of mine in Australia and a scammer who tried to randomly trick him. And then we'll talk about it for a minute. So what I find interesting about this guy does not look scared to me at all. It is so easy to stay anonymous on the internet, to hide your identity and where you are operating from. He's not at all worried about getting caught or getting arrested. And then the other thing that I take away from this is, if you ever wondered why the bad guys do what they do, here's your answer. Where else can I make 20,000 Australian dollars a week stealing it from other people? It's why attackers do what they do. Some other type of email related attacks that I want to touch on very briefly. Spear phishing is where we go after you as an individual. I think you might be surprised to learn how much information there is out on the internet about you, both things that you've put there and things that other people have put there about you. Um, it's not hard for us to use some tools that will go out onto the internet and crawl everywhere and try to find information about you. And it's not just having a public Facebook profile, which is obviously not ideal. But hopefully you've been taught that. It goes beyond that. Let's say you are a long distance runner. It's usually not very hard to go onto Google and go find some competitions that you've competed in or gotten a medal in, or maybe you're an avid golfer. Not that hard to go into the National Golf Database, go pull your handicap, go pull your home course, send you an email as your home course saying, listen, thank you for your patronage over the years. Here's a free round on us during the week. Just fill in this contact form. Everything's legitimate. It's your name. It's your home course. It looks correct. It's coming from the right address. Very easy to manipulate people once we know what their hobbies and interests are. And because of the internet and how much information we put out there about ourselves, it's not that hard to find something that we like. Pharming is one that you'll all be familiar with. This is the mass emails, right? They're trying to sell you watches, or they're trying to sell you little blue pills, or things like that. And you'll have seen some of these, the Nigerian prince scams. Some of them are very, very bad. The spelling, the punctuation, the grammar, it's just so obviously awful. There's no way a large corporate would send out an email that looks like that. And we think to ourselves, who would fall for this crap? It is so clearly a scam. But the reality is that very often these guys put those spelling and grammar mistakes in there on purpose. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. It's not like they can't afford a spell checker. When they put those spelling mistakes in there, you as a relatively educated individual are very likely to not fall for the scam. So by putting those spelling and grammar mistakes in there, they get to not spend any time on you because they're trying to run an efficient business, just like all of us. So if we get the smart, educated people out on the very first phase, we don't have to spend any of our resources on them, and we can spend all of our time and energy on the people that did respond to this arguably poor email, because we're going to get a much better conversion rate on our attack by focusing on those people. So these guys are smarter than we sometimes give them credit for, and they're very effective at what they do, unfortunately. The last one I want to touch on here is whaling. This is where we go after the big fish. This is your senior management team. You'll see a lot of, I'm in a meeting right now, I'm too busy to talk. They'll create a sense of urgency. Anytime you see an email that's got a sense of urgency, go read that thing 3 times, because it is exceedingly likely that attackers will use that sense of urgency. It really cuts down on their ability to be effective if that email just sits in your mailbox overnight. Your IT team have hopefully ways to identify these attacks and act against them. The longer that they have to interact with them, the worse the likelihood is that the attacker will succeed. So there's often that sense of urgency, and they'll say, I'm sure many of you in this call will have seen an attack that we get a lot in South Africa, where someone will Photoshop the bank details on an invoice, send it again, or they'll send an email saying, listen, our banking details have changed, please pay this bank instead. And then obviously it's a scam, and those guys run off with the money, and we're left holding the bag. Yeah, there's a lot. The next one I want to talk about is phishing, which is voice phishing. I'm going to play a little clip. I'm not 100% sure how it's going to come across. If you have poor bandwidth, you might struggle a little, but I think it's very insightful, and there is text at the bottom to read. So it's going to take about 2 minutes, but I think it very well illustrates what phishing is and how effective it can be.
Rudi, sorry, there's no sound on the video. Could we perhaps start it again, please?
Sure, we can try. I'm not 100% sure.
Rudi, I think you'll have to stop sharing, and then when you share, you have to click the sound button to share your computer's on.
Oh, right. Okay. Makes sense. Let me do that quickly. Okay. Can you guys see it?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
And let me know if you can't hear, please.
So I invited a few of the world's best hackers to try to hack me and show me where my vulnerabilities are. And now I'm going to meet them in Las Vegas for DEF CON, the biggest hacker convention of the year. They're going to hack me using social engineering, which is essentially hacking without any code. They just use a phone and an internet connection.
Do you want to do a sample phishing call?
What's phishing?
Phishing is voice solicitation, and basically what you do is you use the phone to extract information or data points that can be used in a later attack.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Who are you going to call?
Maybe I'll call your cell phone provider and
Okay.
see if I can get them to give me your email address.
I bet they're good. I bet they have my back. But yeah, go for it.
I'm going to spoof from your number, so it's going to look like it's calling from you.
Okay.
Hi, I'm so sorry. Can you hear me okay? My baby, I'm sorry. my husband's like, we're about to apply for a loan and we just had a baby and he's like, get this done by today. So I'm so sorry. I can't call you back. I'm trying to log into our account for uses information and I can't remember what email address we used to log the account. The baby's crying and can you help me? Awesome.
In just 30 seconds,
At gmail.com?
Jessica gets access to my personal email address.
Now, if I needed to add our older daughter on our account so she could call in and make changes, how would I need to go about doing that? You would have to send me a secure PIN through a text message? Yeah, well, the thing is, I don't think I'll be able to receive a text message if I'm on the phone. Oh, I'm not on there either? So I thought when we got married, he added me to the account.
Jess uses my girlfriend's name and a fake social security number
5127.
to set up her own personal access to my account.
Wait, I'm sorry. So there's no password on my account right now? Can I set that up?
She even gets the support person to change my password.
Thank you so much for your help today.
So she just basically blocked me out of my own account.
I'll get her fed after this. All right. Thank you.
Holy shit. So they just gave you access to my entire cell phone account.
You're gonna have to go on and change your password now because it's Jess, my name.
And all it took was a crying baby and a phone call.
Yes.
Okay, so I really like that clip. I think it does a much better job of conveying the power of a phishing attack than I could. It is still effective. We still do this. I had a client a couple of years ago where I picked up the phone and asked reception, listen, I'm a student doing a research paper for my thesis. Can you please tell me what antivirus you use? And she just gave me the answer. So we were able to write a backdoor that bypassed that specific antivirus. And it was as easy as just asking. So it is a very effective technique that attackers will use. Another common attack that we make use of is called USB baiting, and we'll leave memory sticks lying around in your office, in the canteen, where you pick up your mail, on the printer, just in a general open plan office. And people are very curious by nature, and we like making use of that fact. So we'll pick up the memory stick, pop it into a machine, and they'll find one of these little clips, depending on what we put in. It'll be a game or a movie or music or something like that. And for those who are curious, by far my best performer is payroll.zip. Everybody wants to see what everyone else is earning, and they think finance left a memory stick lying around. So I've had people click on this 7 or 8 times, and when you click on it, nothing happens. You don't get a pop-up. There's nothing happens. But in the back end, it actually deploys a persistent backdoor onto your machine, so we can get access to your computer anytime we want. These attacks, as I mentioned, also bypass antivirus, because the thing about antivirus is it blocks things it knows about, right? There are a bunch of analysts sitting in an office somewhere. They see what these attacks look like, and they write the antivirus to detect and block those attacks. But when we come up with a new way of delivering this payload, which is it's fairly sophisticated, but it's something we've been able to do consistently for as long as I've been in the industry. We bypass the antivirus and we still get full access to the machine, and the user doesn't. It's not like in the movies where your mouse is moving or weird things are happening on your computer. If a sophisticated attacker has access to your machine, there won't be any indicator for you unless you're going through every single service running as in your task manager, and even then we'll hide it as something that's very common, or there are already multiple instances of, and we'll just add one more. It's very difficult to detect, and large corporates spend very, very large amounts of money trying to identify these attacks as they happen because it's so difficult. Ransomware, you're all fairly familiar with. You have a bad day. You click on an email that you maybe didn't pay attention to, and then suddenly this message pops up and it says, please pay me 1 Bitcoin within the next 72 hours, and I will give you a key to unlock your own data. And if you don't, that data will be lost. And when you go to your My Documents folder, it looks like this. Everything's gibberish. None of your files are there. You can't do anything on your machine. And then you have to choose to either pay these guys or hopefully recover your backups. And at a more mature level, at a more sophisticated level, we see the attack is targeting the backups first. So they'll figure out how the backups are getting done, whether it's a backup site, a DR site, or tape backups in the olden days, or cloud backups, and they'll do their best to encrypt that data first before they encrypt the machines on the network to force you into a position where you have to pay them. Physical access is also a technique that we use, and it's pretty underrated. This is one of my favorite little cartoons. This gentleman is doing an interview on, I think it was the BBC, and right behind him on his whiteboard for the whole world to see is his username and his password. And we see this all the time, right? When we're working with clients, I'm going away for a few days, writes the password on the whiteboard, and it just sits there. Happening less today, but still, unfortunately, very common. Please don't write down your password. Don't do sticky notes on your screen or under your keyboard or anything like that. We know where they are. It's a very common attack. There was a lady in the UK. This is just a placeholder picture, but there was a documented case of a young lawyer in the UK working out of London. She was very, very successful and an overachiever almost. She first in a class in grade school, first in a class in high school, went to an Ivy League university, started working as a young associate at one of the law firms in London. Very prestigious, very much on the fast track to becoming a young partner. And what happened is she'd just recently been promoted, and as part of that promotion got her own office. And she took a photo of herself in her new office and uploaded it to Instagram, which is, I guess, not unusual at all. The only problem is on her desk behind her in this picture was a very sensitive merger document between two multinationals that she was working on, and it was sitting out in the open on her desk. And from context, people started understanding that these companies were talking about a merger, and it was, again, supposed to be secret. And word got out, and people started manipulating the stocks and investing, and it got to the point where they actually had to call off this merger that they'd sunk millions into. And again, after the whole forensic, it came back that this was how it leaked, or at least partially how it leaked, and it effectively ruined her career. So be very, very careful about what you post to social media. The consequences aren't necessarily obvious to us until they occur. Again, I'm pretty fortunate to have been doing this for a long time. I've gone to a lot of conferences. I've met many of the best, most notorious, most well-known hackers in the world, and I can assure you, none of them look like this guy on the left. If I'm trying to get into your office, I'm going to wear a suit and a tie. I'm going to talk on my phone. I'm going to look like I'm busy, like I know where I'm going, and I want people to leave me alone. And they almost always do. It makes it much easier to manipulate people when you're well dressed and they don't expect it. Or you can be a flower delivery guy or a UPS guy. I'm here to read the meter. There are a million different ways to get access. I want to talk quite a bit about passwords, because I think is one of the biggest weak links that we have, and even today people are not picking good passwords. So the first thing I want to talk about is multi-factor authentication. We've touched on this already. It's very, very important. All of those attacks that I talked about earlier, where I manipulate you into typing your username and password into my a fake login page and then I log in after you. None of that works if you make use of multi-factor authentication. So what is that? There are three different types. The first one is something you know. This is the password that you memorize. You'll all be familiar with this. You type it in when you need to. The second one is something you are. That's your biometrics, your fingerprint, your retinal scan, your iris scan. Voice prints, when we deal with the banks today, they actually start, with your permission, recording your voice, and they can do biometric analysis on your voice print, and then you don't have to go through those awkward security questions because they can tell that it's you, even when you have a cold. So very interesting technology that's emerging. And the third one is something you have, right? Again, we'll be familiar with this. When you want to add a beneficiary, not only do you have to type in your username and your password, but you have to press either enter a code on your phone or press a number on your phone in that short time window. The gist of this is to always try to make use of at least two of these three things in combination to prove your authentication. You are who you say you are, your identity. So it's really useful, and I think you'll be surprised how easy and painless it is to implement this stuff. I make use of multi-factor everywhere. If somebody ever got hold of my Google password, I wouldn't particularly care, because as soon as they typed in my password, it would say that's correct, but now what is the code? And then they need my phone, which generates a new code every minute that they would need to type in as well. For those of you using Office 365, it's actually got a built-in, for almost all the license levels, it's got a built-in multi-factor option where you can just connect it to your phone. And I highly encourage you to do that as a very easy way to secure your information. Commonly used passwords are still a problem. We do a lot of password cracking as part of our engagements, and we give companies back their easily guessed passwords, and it's often in the 25 to 50% range. So quarter to a half of all staff pick easy to guess passwords that are already sitting in a dictionary. I'm going to give you a moment to read this cartoon quickly, and we'll talk about that, and then we'll jump into some more technical stuff. Again, I've made this point already. Please be careful about what you put out there about yourself. If you say, I very much love my dog, it's reasonable to assume that your password might be your dog's name, your kid's name, your spouse's name, somebody's birthday. Those things are very common, and often that information is already out on the internet. So please try not to pick things that are personal to you or related to your personal life as your password, because a dedicated attacker may well be able to find that and try it. So have you ever wondered why attackers don't, or your IT team don't know what your password is? You, for example, you forget your password on a Monday morning, you have a very important meeting, you say to the IT guys, listen, I don't want to change my password, I don't have time, just tell me what it is. And they say, well, we can't, we don't know what it is, we can't see it. The reason for that is your passwords don't get stored on servers, hopefully, unless they're really not following good practices, but hopefully your passwords aren't being stored on the server. What happens instead is, as you type in your password, it goes through a very complicated one-way mathematical process, and it spits out a string like this called a hash, and that hash is always the same length regardless of how long the password was that you typed in, and that hash gets saved on the server. Tomorrow morning, when you type in your password again, it takes that password that you typed in, immediately calculates the hash using that mathematical process, and it says, does the hash I just calculated match the one I have on file? And if so, I can authenticate you. Why this is really clever is, if a guy like me comes along, he doesn't automatically see everybody's password just sitting there in that database in plain text. He only sees these hashes, and at least in theory, this hash is, again, it's one way. You can't take the hash and make it back into the passwords. But unfortunately, attackers are pretty clever as well, and they've gone and pre-compiled many of the most commonly used passwords into their hashes already. And if I get my hands on your hash, it's as simple for me as to say, the hash I just stole from you doesn't match anything in my, we call this a rainbow table. Does this hash match anything in my database? And if so, I know what the corresponding plaintext password is, and I can just type in. And this is why people say, don't use commonly used passwords, don't use words that you find in the dictionary. They will have been pre-compiled. We're also very, very good at guessing passwords. I've got a a server at my office with a very fancy graphics card. It's commercially available. It's something you buy over the counter, but it's fairly expensive. And this one will calculate password hashes at 24 billion guesses a second. As you can imagine, that's pretty quick. So if you have an 8-character or a 9-character password, especially using a mask, it takes 5 minutes to crack an 8-character password, or less than 3 hours to crack a 9-character password. A 10-character password takes a little bit less than 2 days, but it becomes very big very quickly. 11 characters take the better part of a month. 12 characters take multiple months, and then we're into years. So by the time you get to 15, 16 character password, it'll take your lifetime to crack your password. It's also important to understand this correlation, because I think a lot of people get confused. The more complex the password is, the less often you should need to change it. Because when we're trying to do these brute force attacks, and a brute force attack is where we go AA, AB, AC, AD, we're trying every possible combination to guess your password at a very, very fast rate. The longer your password is, the less often you have to change it, because the longer it's going to take for us to crack that. This obviously doesn't take into account passwords that have been leaked, or where you're using the same password on multiple websites or things like that. Which kind of brings me nicely into my next question. We're constantly seeing multiple hundreds of millions of passwords being leaked in breaches. This is actually from as far back as 2016, where we had 500 million passwords leaked in that year. And it's not little companies. Again, this won't be news to you, but it's very large corporates that are getting passwords stolen from them. A couple of years ago, Yahoo lost, I think it was over 1 billion people's passwords. And their CEO actually lost shares and got fined because of the way that she handled the disclosure of that incident. There's a very cool website called haveibeenpwned.com. And you can go and type in your email address there, and it will look through all of the breaches that we know about that have been collected in a database, and then tell you where your email address has been found as one of these leaked or stolen credentials. And I think I'm about as safe as you can be on the internet. I really understand how this stuff works and how to keep myself safe. But when I type my personal email address into this website, I've been the victim of at least 7 different breaches through no fault of my own, right? The attackers break into the website and steal my username and password, or at least my hash, from that website directly. And if I was using the same username and password on lots of different websites, which I'm confident in saying most of you do, that attacker would be able, if he could crack that password using the way I just showed you, be able to log into all of those other websites as well, even though I did absolutely nothing wrong. So a pretty cool website if you want to go see if you have been the victim of one of these leaks. And also the point I'm trying to make is, please don't use the same password on lots of different websites. Passwords are like underwear. Change yours often. Don't share it with friends. Longer is better. Be mysterious, and don't leave yours lying around. So good advice for life and for passwords, and a nice easy way to teach users to follow best practice. So I want to just quickly show you some things that maybe you don't understand around complexity of passwords. If I took a crappy old laptop from 2012 and I tried to crack the following passwords, how long would it take? If my password was password 1, it would take 4 seconds. That kind of makes sense, right? It's a really bad password. It would be one of the first things that they guess. But look at the second one, and keep in mind, this is a laptop from 2012. This is ancient by today's standards. If my password was hard to remember, yeah, and I think this is kind of what most people's passwords look like today. We have uppercase, we have lowercase, we have numerals, we have special characters. We call this substitution, where you say, instead of a E, I'm going to put a 3. Instead of an A, I'm going to put a 4. Maybe I throw an exclamation mark on the end. If this was my password, and I think most of us were taught that this is what a good password looks like, it would take 4 months for that laptop to crack, which I would argue is not very good. I mean, it's a very old laptop, and this looks like a pretty good password. It's long. Admittedly, we could add a special character, and that would make it a lot stronger. But I'm saying this is I think a very long, strong password, better than most people's, I'd argue, and it would take 4 months. But look at the last one. James eats a giant peach. All in lowercase, nothing fancy. Spaces count as special characters, so there's a little bit of complexity there. But this would take 10,000 centuries to crack on that laptop. And I think this comes to as a surprise to a lot of people. And the reason for this is just the length of the password. When we're talking about brute forcing passwords, the length is very, very important in determining how difficult they are to crack. And the problem for us at the moment is we get taught to try to outthink computers like computers. They say it's got to be 8 characters, it's got to be uppercase and lowercase and numerals and special characters. And that's not how a human brain works. So we end up sitting there going, was it an E? Was it a 3? Where did I put that comma again? I can't remember my password. I have to go change it again. Where if you stop trying to outthink your computer like a computer and started thinking like a person, you would have much better success. We are very good at writing sentences. It's what we do. It's how most of us earn our living. So if you pick a sentence for a password, you're going to have a much better success rate, and it's going to be much more difficult for attackers to crack that password. And it's very easy to come up with secure passwords. And you're going to find that you type it faster, you make less mistakes, and you have a better time remembering it. So pick a phrase, a sentence, something that makes you smile. I love my wife, or I hate my wife, whatever is going on in your life. It's just a lyric out of a song, or something that you enjoy, or something that makes you smile, a personal motto. There's a million different sentences that you can pick as passwords, and you'll find that they're easy to remember and very difficult to crack. You should still make use of uppercase and lowercase numbers and special characters. It's fairly easy to incorporate that into a password. That adds complexity, which makes it much more difficult. And then please don't be this guy. We've seen some weird things out there. Okay, very briefly, let's touch on password managers. Hopefully, most of you know what that is by now. A password manager lets you randomly generate a password as you get to a website and register for the first time. And then it hides all of those passwords they look like this. This is what all my passwords look like. They're all 25 character randomly generated. I couldn't tell you what any of my passwords are. They all get managed by this password manager, and they get randomly generated when I register. When I get back to that website, it fills in that username and the password for me, and it just waits for me to type login. All I have to remember is my master password. That's multi-factor authentication protected, and it's not very onerous. I have to update it maybe once a month, or when I log into a new device. It's how it keeps me safe, and it manages all my passwords for me. And the important point I'm trying to make here is, if somebody gets a hold of one of my passwords through one of these breaches, they won't be able to use them anywhere else, because they're all unique and different for every website. So if you haven't tried a password manager yet, I highly recommend you at least give it a try. They're completely free to use. I will say, if you are going to make use of a password manager, please don't just take your current password and save it into the password manager, which we've seen a fair number of people do, because it defeats the purpose. You have to generate new random passwords inside this manager as you go to websites, or at least when you start out, for all of the sites that you visit frequently. Last couple of things, and then I want to take a few questions, if there are, because I know we're almost out of time. Please read your yeah, you need to. There's two things here. Firstly, please read your warnings. We have some examples of gibberish warnings that people just completely ignore. This is what they see. They just see technical crap. And those things are often very important. Also, please don't make use of websites at all that don't have HTTPS. The S stands for secured, and it means that data is encrypted in transit. Remember when I showed you that man in the middle attack at the start? If you're using an HTTPS website, and that's why your bank forces you to, that data is encrypted, which means, I mean, again, there are many ways to bypass this, but for the purposes of this conversation at a high level, if you use HTTPS, that data is encrypted. And while I can capture that and pass it on to your bank, I can't actually see what's happening inside that traffic. So it's a very important layer in keeping you secure. I want to go so far as to say, if you are not on a website that has the HTTPS and the padlock, you do not want to touch your keyboard at all. You do not want to provide any information. What we see a lot is maybe your local estate agent has a website and they have a contact form, and you're interested in buying a house. So you fill in your name and your surname and your physical address and your telephone number and all of these things into this website that's not protecting that data, and it's going out onto the internet for anyone to see. You really don't want to do that. Just a word of warning about public Wi-Fi. it's really easy for us to set up what we call rogue access point. It's a fake Wi-Fi access point that's got the exact same name as the real one. Your phone and your laptop by design will jump to whatever the strongest signal is with an SSID or a name that you've already connected to in the past. So if I make a fake one with the same name, I can force your device to jump onto my rogue access point, and then I can often see exactly what you're doing, what you're copying. There are again known instances of people actually stripping the encryption off the website before sending that data out so that they can read the responses in plain text. Be very careful if you use a lot of public Wi-Fi. If you travel a lot, I'm sure a lot of you do, invest in a good VPN. Please don't use a free VPN if you're not paying for the service, and these guys have an expense of putting down servers and paying for bandwidth every month. If it doesn't cost you anything, then you are the product. They're harvesting your information. It's the only way that model is sustainable. So get a paid, trusted, reputable VPN solution. If you are going to use public Wi-Fi, connect to the VPN first. Otherwise, please don't do sensitive stuff. Of course, you can watch YouTube, you can go on Facebook or whatever you're comfortable with. Just understand you're effectively standing up in that coffee shop and shouting what you're doing to absolutely everybody, because that's the technical equivalent of what you're doing. Try not to do banking or sensitive things on public Wi-Fi unless you're already connected to a VPN. Many of you, I'm sure, will also have VPN connections to the office, and you can't do much work until you've connected to the office VPN, and that's why. Let's move on. Bring your own devices if you are allowed to connect your devices to the network. Please understand that comes with a bunch of personal responsibility. In the old days, we had one server and one computer for every user, and that was the extent of our attack surface. Today, it looks completely different. There are hundreds of servers, and there are phones and tablets and smart TVs and toasters and washing machines. We're connecting everything to the internet today, and a lot of those things come with vulnerabilities built in, because especially where you're buying cheapy products from Asia, for example, they don't really care that much about security. They're just trying to produce the cheapest thing they can. And when you put that device into your house and you connect it to your house, you're really inviting attackers in. Also, even if you are buying reputable products, understand what it means. Make sure you change those default passwords. You don't make it easy for people to get access to your home networks. Again, identity theft, I'm sure you guys know about. It's pretty easy to impersonate people. Somebody on Facebook sends you a message and says, listen, please don't tell anyone, but I'm going through a really rough patch. Can you loan me a couple of grand? I'll pay you back at the end of the month. You wire them the money. A couple of months go by. When you ask your friend, listen, are you ever going to pay me back? They have no idea what you're talking about. They weren't the ones who asked you for the loan, and that money's gone. So make sure you know who you're talking to and that you trust them. We're moving a lot of our stuff into the cloud. Please understand that the cloud is just somebody else's computer. They're still machines somewhere. They're still being managed by someone. Make sure that it's a reputable company, someone you trust, somebody who's going to take your data seriously. Okay, piracy, please be careful not to install malicious stuff on your machines. We see this a lot. It used to be very common, especially with kids' educational games. So you take your work laptop home, your kids want to play a game, you go into let's say less than reputable website, you download one of these educational games. When you install that thing, it also contains a backdoor that bypasses your antivirus, and you're effectively inviting attackers into not only your machine but your corporate network as well. So please make sure you don't install software that you don't know from vendors that you don't trust. It is fairly common and a very effective attack vector. Another one that you'll have seen is you're surfing websites and you see a pop-up that says you have 742 problems on your machine. Click here to install our antivirus and we'll fix it for you. And as soon as you install the software, it goes, your whole computer starts behaving awfully. It was fine before, but now it's slow, it's hanging, it's restarting. You can't do anything. This thing keeps popping up and saying it's because of all of these viruses on your machine. eventually, out of sheer desperation, you end up paying the $50 or whatever it is. And all this software does is it removes itself, because it was causing all of those problems after you installed it, this fake antivirus. It was generating those problems to try to get you to pay the $50. And it's almost impossible to get that software off your machine once you've installed it without paying them. And these guys are so mature that they actually have call centers running out of like legitimate call centers in for India, for example, where they'll offer you excellent customer service and help you if you can't pay with credit cards, because again, it's easy for them. It's obviously illegal, but it's easy for them to hide their identities and guide you through the process of paying them to effectively take their own crapware off your machine. So to end off with just a couple of real world examples of things I've done with my own clients, as I go through these, think back to that John Chambers quote. And ask yourself, would some of these things maybe have been effective on me? So we had a client where we knew the senior executive lady was very close with her kids. She would stop work at lunchtime every day to go pick them up from school, spend a bit of time with them, and then come back to the office and work until very late because she was very driven. But pictures of her kids, talked about them a lot. Obviously nothing wrong with that, but it gives us an attack vector, right? So what we did is we went to the internet, looked on Facebook, found out where the kids go to school, and then sent the mom an email as the school saying, listen, we're going on a field trip next month. Please fill in this form, pay the required fee as an example. And from there was able to compromise her entire machine because it's in line with her lifestyle. We had a client who, large corporate, they had just installed a fancy new VPN solution, and the IT manager kept telling us about how strong and how good this VPN is and we'll never get access to it. And what we effectively did was just sent an email to a bunch of his staff and said, listen, as him, saying, listen, we just made an update to the VPN. Please make sure you can still log in by clicking on the link. And I can't remember exactly, but it was 50 or 60 people who logged in with their real Active Directory username and password into our fake VPN login site. And after he had spent all this money buying this very fancy, expensive VPN, we just bypassed the whole process by manipulating the users, and then we could log into the VPN as that user pretty easily. We're running out of time, so I'm going to skip the other examples. But what can you do? If you see something, say something. Please, a little black screen pops up for a second after you clicked an email. Don't be scared to say, oh, someone's going to shout at me because I opened an attachment I wasn't supposed to. If you tell people what happened, it's going to be much easier for them to identify and fix the problem. It's very difficult to detect some of the more sophisticated attacks, and they're reliant on you to help. And if you don't say anything, it's going to end badly for everyone involved. Second one is, please update your stuff. I know it's annoying. I know you feel like you never do any updates, but you keep postponing those updates. Those things fix vulnerabilities that attackers use to gain access to your infrastructure. It's very important that you keep your stuff up to date. It's one of the best ways to protect your infrastructure. And the last one is, keep calm and love your IT department. I know those guys are grumpy sometimes and they're overworked, and but again, you have to work as a team. It's the only way that you're going to keep people like me out. So it's really important that you work together and you're not scared to tell them when something bad happens or you see something, because you have to work as a team. And with that, I am done. I hope you enjoyed it. I don't know if we have time for a couple of questions. I'll pass back to Ryan.
Awesome. Thanks, Rudi. There were some really good insights. Appreciate all the views that were shared. I hope that everyone got a lot of value out of that. I know I did, so thank you so much for your time. There are a couple quick questions in the chat box, so if you don't mind, I'll run those past you. First one is on whether or not you have a recommended or preferred password manager. Oh, sorry, Rudi, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, I am. Again, I'd have one that I use, but I'm not saying you should use that. For what it's worth, I use LastPass. It doesn't matter as long as it's reputable. This goes to, I get this question a lot, and I get it about other things as well. What's better, iPhone or Android? What's better, Chrome or Firefox? It doesn't really matter as long as it's reputable. All of those guys work very hard, and it changes from week to week who's secure and who's got a vulnerability. But they just do your own research. Don't just blindly take the first one that gets advertised to you in a pop-up. Stick to the reputable brands. Go do a little bit of homework. I use LastPass. Any of the well-known ones are great. I will say though, LastPass had a leak. They lost a lot of people's information. It happens. but they try really hard to protect you, and I think that's the important part.
And then maybe as a final question, just as we head to the top of the hour, if you had to summarize and say, here are 5 things that individual, and I know you had on your second last slide 3 things to do, but if you went to 5 things, what would your 5 top things be for somebody to do to better protect themselves and the company that they work for?
VPN, multi-factor authentication, educate yourself, I think is very important. Be aware of the scams, the social engineering things that are out there. Yeah, I think those cover everything else. I mean, it's a very high level, but if you do those, the rest kind of fall into place. Update, obviously.
Yeah, that is key. I don't see any other questions in the chat, so I suppose last chance if everyone wants to pop anything through. Otherwise, Rudi, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute privilege, and I wish everyone a fantastic Thursday further.